Kouri Richins was arrested a year after her husband passed away. She has now been charged with his murder and his attempted murder. And today we are going over a whole bunch of new charges, and we're going to talk about those. This case is in Utah. The judge in Utah is a delight. When I saw the initial headlines, I was like, what in the heck are they talking about? Because the news often positions her as a children's book author. Why? Because after her husband died, she wrote a book about grief, a children's book about grief. She was promoting that book when she was arrested for his murder. It seems to me in hindsight now that the reason it took so long to arrest her is because it took them quite a while to get into her phone, and the information in her phone is really what solidified the arrest in this case. He died from an overdose of fentanyl. It's being charged and alleged that that was not willfully ingested and that she poisoned him with fentanyl. So for trial, the original indictment had mortgage fraud claims, forgery claims. Those were severed out of the case. So this indictment has some of that in it. So when she goes to trial in February 2026, she is going to face aggravated murder charges, aggravated attempted murder charges, and false fraudulent insurance claim charges that were right around the time of death. The court took the mortgage fraud and forgery charges for the most part out of the case that's going to trial. And so we now have a second indictment that is bringing back in the forgery, the fraud, and some of the other money. So we're going to see that all now because we're going to look at that new indictment. On November 11th, 2021, the defendant wrote check number 241 from her Navy Federal account to her business account for $3,000. At the time, the Navy Federal account balance was zero. The line of credit was extended over $14,000. Defendant deposited the check into the business account. At the time, the business account was negative $2,231.39. Defendant transferred $1,000 out to her mother and $2,000 to her personal account before America First could draw the $3,000 and the check had insufficient funds. This is the first time I've seen money going to her mother. I mean, I don't know how much more you launder money. That money just went in a fucking circle. $1,000 to mom, $2,000 to her personal account before her business account check could bounce from the Navy Fed account. Money laundering isn't often so easy to explain, but there it is just in one paragraph. Well, this just follows the pattern of you go with the little checks and see if the world collapses. And when the world doesn't collapse at the $2,000 check and the $2,000 check and the $3,000 check and the $5,000 check and the $4,000 check, you just go to the $10,000 check. December 20th, 2021, defendant wrote check number 294 from Navy Fed for $10,000. At that time, the Navy Fed account balance was negative $51.41, and the line of credit was extended $14,565. Defendant deposited the check into the Kouri Richins Realty account, not her personal account. At the time, the business account was negative $1,133.99. The defendant transferred $9,592.33 from Kouri Richins Realty to several creditors before America First could draw off it. So that was to keep the creditors at bay. Well, this is new. In late 2021, Kouri Richins Realty owned a home in Heber City, in Utah. Address not relevant. Defendant owed $456,500 in 4 short-term, high-interest, hard money loans. 3 of the 4 notes secured by this property matured on January 7th or 8th, 2022. Beginning in October 2021, defendant unsuccessfully tried to refinance that property that she was flipping into a traditional 30-year mortgage. She planned to then, quote, seller finance the property for her best friend. Don't do your best friend dirty to save your own ass. The best friend, bestie's husband, and their 3 small children moved into the home. So they moved in, signed the lease with the option to purchase, wherein the best friend agreed to pay defendant $2,900 a month in rent with the option to buy the home for $490,000 down the road. So Kouri's carrying the mortgage on this home for over $400,000 in short-term, high-interest loans. 4 of them. She can't get a mortgage on it. Those loans come due quickly and you have to pay them off. And she's put her bestie in a position where her bestie's going to be paying rent and could be foreclosed on and kicked out of this house without even a blink. And I would suspect bestie had no idea. On January 11th, 2022, the defendant's best friend caused 2 wires totaling $45,000 to transfer to Kouri Richins Realty's account. Correspondence between defendant and her best friend establishes that defendant agreed to apply this money to a down payment on a long-term mortgage, supposedly closing in January 18th, 2022. Are they alleging that when she ran out of people to defraud, she defrauded her best friend? We have to go code Audacity. Immediately prior to the best friend's wires entering the Kouri Richins account, the account balance was negative $1,900. As soon as the first wire entered the account, but before the second wire entered the account, the defendant transferred $19,000 plus of her best friend's down payment to her personal account to cover a wire transfer of the exact same amount that went to Fund Fee, an entity with which defendant had taken out a high interest accounts receivable loan unrelated to the property. Wire 1 comes in, the money immediately goes out to cover personal expenses of Kouri Richins because there is another debt collector waiting for funds unrelated to the house that the bestie is living in. These 2 wires totaling $45,000 were sent on January 11th. By January 19th, defendant had spent the remainder of her best friend's $45,000 down payments on expenses unrelated to the house that the bestie is living in. So that house is still servicing all kinds of debt, but it's not being paid down. On January 19th, Kouri Richins Realty account balance was $227.69. The home refinancing did not take place in January 2022. Defendant was forced to enter into an extension agreement with the largest of the 4 hard money lenders on January 26, 2022. The 30-year mortgage lender revoked the proposed loan in mid-February and offered less affordable terms. Gee, I wonder why. The defendant was forced to enter into another extension agreement with the largest hard money lender on February 16, 2022. The unpaid principal balance on that date was $347,000, $715.86. And the extension agreement extended the repayment term to March 8th, 2022, 4 days after Eric Richins' death. Ultimately, one of the defendant's lenders foreclosed on the property and evicted the defendant's best friend and her family. The defendant occasionally employed Carmen Luber to clean houses. Ms. Luber told law enforcement that sometime in early 2022, before Eric Richins' death, defendant either called or texted her to ask that she procure some fentanyl for defendant. Forensic analysis of Verizon records for the defendant's cell phone show 746 SMS messages, 94 MMS messages, and 12 calls between defendant's phone and Ms. Luber's phone between January 1st, 2022 and March 15th, 2022. It is my understanding from all of the proceedings in this case that Ms. Luber took a deal as a part of disclosing all of this information, and that Ms. Luber was in custody when all of this started to come to light, in custody on an unrelated thing. Ms. Luber told law enforcement that pursuant to the defendant's request for fentanyl, she contacted Nicole Cummings for an introduction to someone who would sell her fentanyl. Ms. Cummings confirmed that Ms. Luber asked her for an introduction to someone that would sell Ms. Luber fentanyl. Ms. Cummings elaborated that Ms. Luber messaged her through Facebook asking to speak with her, and she called her shortly thereafter. A Facebook message between the two on February 5th, 2022 at 1:37 p.m. asked, "Text me, I got a question. Won't do it on this." In response to the inquiry, Cummings provided Luber with the phone number of a dealer. Everybody's names are just getting put into this. Robert Crozier. Luber told law enforcement that she met with Crozier at the Maverick gas station in Draper on February 11th, 2022, and purchased from him 15 to 30 round light green pills, which she understood to be fentanyl. Luber told law enforcement that she delivered the pills that she purchased from Crozier to defendant in a hand-to-hand transactions in the driveway. There's no way that she said that it was a hand-to-hand transaction. That is 100% law enforcement speak for I gave them to her. In the driveway of Lauber's home in Heber, either February 11th or 12th. The phone data shows that in addition to the text messages, defendant and Lauber exchanged on February 11th, defendant and Lauber exchanged text messages on February 12th at 9:58 a.m. and 2:49 p.m. And Lauber was located at her home during both exchanges. 26 new charges for Kouri Richins, a lot of similar patterns of behavior that we saw charged in the homicide case with the crumbling debt load from her realty business. New information, though, came to light in the extensive affidavit filed with this information, including that in one of the homes that she was trying to flip as part of her business, she had her bestie's husband and 3 children move in. Bestie wired 2 separate wires of $45,000 to Kouri as a payment towards a mortgage, and Kouri went and put that money into other places like immediately. And that is how we ended up at Code Green, because the information regarding the murder and attempted murder of Eric Richins, we have talked a lot about in other cases. Details of the mortgage fraud, the money laundering, and the checks was new information, including as those bad checks were being written to move money from account to account and withdraw it before the check could be pulled on an account with insufficient funds, money was funneling out to her mother fairly regularly in the tune of thousands of dollars. She put her best friend in a home that had 4 hard money loans with very short terms that she could not pay. And prosecutor Brad Bloodworth put a sentence in there telling us how that ended with the lenders foreclosing on the home and evicting the best friend and her family, husband and 3 small children, from the home that she had been paying rent on to Kouri Richins, and had wired $45,000 to Kouri Richins for a down payment on a mortgage that was never going to happen based on the amount of debt Kouri Richins was holding. It also shows the picture of the mounting debt and increasing debt leading up to Eric Richins' attempted murder and then murder as charged in this case, lining out the conversations where Kouri Richins is trying to procure fentanyl and lining some of that out in more detail than we saw in other affidavits, similar to what we saw in the preliminary hearing in the murder and attempted murder case. These are separate charges. Some of this information will come into the murder case as motive. Some of this will come in as consciousness of guilt. We saw more information about Google searches. We didn't see the Google search luxury prisons for rich people in this one, but we did see some other very telling Google searches, including how long does life insurance companies take to pay? What is a lethal dose of fentanyl? If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? Can cops force you to do a lie detector test? Women, Utah prison. Can cops uncover deleted messages iPhone? And can you delete everything off an old iPhone without actually having it? Those are from June 6th, 2022, before her arrest in May of 2023. It took them quite a while to get into Kouri Richins' cell phone because of the technology. So once the technology caught up and they got into her cell phone, I believe it was sent out to the FBI. The FBI! Before they were able to access her phone through Celebrite. Once it went to the FBI, they got the extraction from her phone. Her arrest was not very long after that. And we saw all of that in the arguments regarding suppression and in the preliminary hearing for this case. There's a playlist on my channel of this case. As we get to the end of the extensive affidavit in the Kouri Richins case, we also see more description about where the money was going, how the money was going, and what she was text messaging, who she was text messaging, what she was Googling, and the things that I think the prosecution will use as arguments for consciousness of guilt as this goes to trial. This case is still scheduled to go to trial at the middle of February 2026, last through the end of March 2026, and I will be covering it the best I can when it goes to trial. How it will be allowed to be recorded is still a bit of an unknown. The court is not super media friendly, so we will see how that goes as we get closer to trial. But I will keep you up to date on this case and on the murder case. This case is not going to go to trial with the murder case. There will be information that will overlap between the two, but this case was just charged June 27th, 2025. Previously, the court had separated out some of the mortgage fraud and forgery counts in the murder case. So not all of this information about the financial crimes will come in, but some of it will when it goes to motive and consciousness of guilt. And then this case will move along separately behind the murder case. I have not seen a date for her to be arraigned on this case yet. I have not seen that she's been arraigned on this case yet, but I will keep you in the loop on both. And I am keeping an eye on the civil cases. Some of those civil cases are paused until the criminal case concludes, but there are numerous civil cases going on with the estate of Eric Richins. So I will keep you in the loop on those as well. To those of you new to this case, it is a whirlwind. It's been going on since I started covering it during the bail hearing in 2023. And we will see this case finally go to trial in 2026. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Laundering app at launderingapp.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Laundered.